James Wiseman is about to be unlocked, and the rest of the NBA is terrified. After having a pretty disappointing rookie season, Wiseman is looking to get his career right back on track, and is trying to live up to the expectations that he once had when he was drafted. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports, I make opinionative NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. James Wiseman was drafted with the number 2 overall selection during the 2020 NBA draft by the Golden State Warriors. And originally when he was being drafted, many had very high expectations for him, considering the skill and versatility that he did have at that center position, which is perfect for the new age NBA. But when you also consider he was being drafted by the Golden State Warriors, who at that point they already had a bunch of high-level superstars on their team who could be great mentors for any young player, but especially a high overall selection in James Wiseman. But when you also consider that the Warriors have had a great track record of developing young players, people just thought the Warriors would be a perfect match for James Wiseman. But unfortunately, when the season started, Wiseman didn't necessarily have the most impressive year, only averaging around 11 points per game on 52% shooting from the field, 5.8 rebounds on 0.7 assists on only 21 minutes per game played as well. Now I will say there definitely were some nice moments that Wiseman did have, showing off his versatility offensively alongside with some skills that he had defensively, but the issue was we just weren't seeing it enough, and that could come down to a bunch of different factors. The first and most obvious factor was the fact that Wiseman didn't necessarily play all that much during his rookie year. He only played 39 games, and it seemed like he never truly got a long stretch of games going for him. It just seemed like injuries were preventing Wiseman from truly feeling comfortable out there. So of course for any player in the league, that's always going to be a major factor. But when you consider that Wiseman, of course, A, was a rookie, but B, had all the pressure of being the number 2 overall selection on his shoulders, that could of course affect him tremendously. Now another factor for why Wiseman didn't necessarily play all that well during his rookie season is actually due to the fact that he was on the Golden State Warriors. Now I mentioned before that a lot of people expected the Warriors to be a perfect match for Wiseman due to the fact that they're very good at developing young talent, alongside with the fact that they already have a bunch of high-level players on the team who have championship experience and players that Wiseman could learn from. And while all that is true, at the same time, when you're as good as the Warriors have been, there's certainly added pressure on these young guys. And if, for example, Wiseman were to go to a team that wasn't all that good and wasn't competing for the playoffs even, there would just be a lot more freedom for a young player like Wiseman to just do whatever he feels comfortable with, or just do whatever he wants out there, and not feel like he has to constantly be on his toes, because if he makes a mistake, he can A, get pulled out of the game, but more importantly, B, cost his team wins and cost his team games. Now I think in terms of the long-term future, it will be a benefit that Wiseman is on the Warriors, but just specifically talking about his rookie season, I definitely think that could have played a factor. But fast forwarding to his second season, unfortunately the injury bug didn't leave him, as he did suffer a torn meniscus and didn't play in his second season whatsoever. Now of course it must be tough for a player drafted as highly as Wiseman was to have a relatively disappointing year 1 and not be able to play in year 2 due to injury. Of course that would be difficult on anyone, but especially for a young player in Wiseman's position, it must have been tough. But in my opinion, there definitely were certain positives to Wiseman being out the entire year last year. And the biggest positive in my mind would be Wiseman wouldn't necessarily have the pressure of being the number 2 overall selection because he wasn't playing that year, but at the same time he was able to be with the team for the most part last year and was able to see how most of these guys train day in and day out, was able to watch each and every game from the sidelines, which might have given him a different perspective, and overall, besides actually playing on the court, he might have felt more comfortable in the NBA in terms of certain other aspects. So I definitely think the fact that Wiseman didn't play at all in his second season, although not ideal of course, there still were some positives that went alongside with that. But that kind of brings us to the point where we're at now, going into his third season, where are wondering what we can expect from Wiseman. Now, at the time of recording this video, the Warriors and Wiseman specifically have played 2 preseason games up until this point, and in his first preseason game, he played very well, putting up phenomenal statistics, and although in his second preseason game, he didn't necessarily put up the best statistics, Wiseman has certainly shown flashes of what he could potentially be in the future thus far. Now, of course, it's only been a couple games, so it's not a big sample size, and also, of course, it's only the preseason, so you really can't take all that much from this, but at the very least, it is nice to see Wiseman playing well out there, and it seems like he's somewhat comfortable out there. Which, coming off a significant injury of any kind, is the first thing that you look for, but especially when you talk about a player that's coming off a significant meniscus tear, that's of course something that you need to pay attention to. But now the question is, what are my expectations for Wiseman going forward? Now, the expectations that I had for Wiseman at the time of the draft was just a high-level starter. Now, whether that meant he would be a perennial all-star, a superstar, or maybe even a tick below an all-star, I wasn't necessarily sure, but one thing that I was sure of is this guy had all the talent in the world and was perfect for the new age NBA, so if he consistently put in hard work into his game season after season, I definitely thought he could have gotten to, at the very least, a perennial all-star level. Now, at this point, I feel like I still do have similar expectations. Now, of course, I'm not expecting him to be a superstar in the next season or two, or even an all-star in the next season or two. That's going to take a little bit, in my opinion, maybe 2, 3, or even 4 seasons, but I definitely still think he can get there. Now, one thing that I do want to mention is I personally will be giving Wiseman some time to develop, and I wouldn't necessarily be calling him a draft bust after 1 or 2 bad seasons, because something that I've noticed from a lot of fans, especially newer fans, is once a player gets drafted with a top 5 or maybe even a top 10 selection, and they don't necessarily live up to expectations in the first season or two, a lot of fans typically tend to think that that player is a draft bust and want their team to get rid of them. But one thing that we do know at this point is players tend to develop in different ways, and it takes different players different amount of times to fully live up to their expectations. Now, of course, some players never do, but there's been multiple examples, a ton of examples in the past of players who didn't necessarily play well in their first 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 seasons, but in that 5th season, they finally started to figure things out, and they turned out to be all-time great players. Steve Nash is a perfect example of this, where in his first 2 or 3 seasons, he didn't really play well whatsoever, but then he started to feel comfortable in the NBA, he started to get a hang of certain things in the NBA, and he turned out to be the all-time great that we know him for today. Now, of course, I'm not saying I think Wiseman's going to be an all-time great, it was just an example I'm trying to make. And basically, I'm saying I'm willing to give Wiseman some time to see if he can truly live up to expectations. But at the same time, if in 2 or maybe 3 seasons from now, Wiseman is still basically the same player that he is today, at that point, I would be willing to say he's a draft bust, maybe even a little bit sooner than that. But with that being said, at this point, I still am extremely excited to see what Wiseman can do throughout his career, because I do at this point see him as a player that could be a huge part of what the Warriors do going forward in the long-term future. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think James Wiseman could be a great player going forward, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out, guys.